This presentation is about what's called the Impact Investment Fund, which is a component of the FIOVANA project in Madagascar. FIOVANA is a USAID Food for Peace Development Food Security activity or project that was proposed by ADRA International with the goal of achieving sustainable improvement of food, nutrition, security, and resilience of vulnerable populations. And the investment fund focused primarily on the resilience component. The project is a 5-year, $45 million project starting in 2019, ending in 2024. So, what is market systems thinking? To help understand the logic of FIOVANA's Impact Investment Fund, you need to understand market systems development approach. Arguably, the beamexchange.org is probably one of the best sources of market systems development material out there. And they have a few short videos which I think describe market systems development and how it's different better than I could, and certainly more quickly than I could. So I'm going to play those videos. And then we will get on to the rest of the presentation. But keep in mind that the investment fund is designed based on a market systems development thinking. So okay, it appears no audio. Let me, oh, that's not good. I will try, I'll make the presentation much shorter for sure. Okay, let's try this again.
If you've heard of market systems development, you might be asking, what does it mean? What's business or private enterprise got to do with reducing poverty? And how does this compare with more conventional aid? Let's shed some light and start with an example. Take Petra, a smallholder farmer living in poverty in a hilly rural area. Her family relies on cash from raising animals and selling milk. To take advantage of growing markets for meat and dairy products in cities, Petra needed to increase production. But this carried several risks, one being livestock disease, which makes animals unproductive. Because veterinary companies saw no profit in providing services to rural areas, the nearest vet service was hours away. Along with other small farmers, the risk of disease discouraged Petra from investing her savings to boost her herd, and so they were excluded from the new food market opportunities. Conventionally, aid agencies and governments tried to help people like Petra directly. No vet services? Then let's vaccinate livestock, or even let's hand out cattle to replace any that die. The problem with such solutions is that, first, they inevitably only reach a few people, so they lack widespread impact. Second, the benefits end when the funding runs out, so they are unsustainable. Worse, some handouts may actually block entrepreneurs from creating businesses that could have provided affordable goods and services for years to come. market systems development is different. Its practitioners see that even poor people routinely engage in markets to buy goods and services and to earn income. They also recognize that many markets fail to work effectively or fairly, but seek practical ways to make them work better. Agencies using a market systems approach look for the root causes of market failure, for barriers that disadvantage poor people or exclude them from economic opportunities. Then, with innovations and investment, they help businesses develop viable long-term solutions that can be scaled up. In Petra's case, lack of access to livestock health services was addressed in 3 ways: helping vet product manufacturers to understand the potential for rural sales, lobbying for reform of regulations that obstructed affordable services, and shared investments to test the viability of innovative rural pharmacies that then took affordable services into remote areas. This approach meant working with diverse actors besides farmers, such as manufacturers, traders, village-level pharmacists, vets, and government officials. Ultimately, this led to a more inclusive market system, with ongoing investment and innovation by businesses. As a result, tens of thousands of remote farming households, including Petra's, are now benefiting from viable local vet services at affordable prices. Petra's story is just one example of transforming market systems to realize the economic and human potential of people living in poverty. It exemplifies a development approach that can achieve both large-scale impact and lasting change. Instead of handouts, the approach pursues commercial and social benefits in tandem. By innovating, sharing financial risks, and building trust, it transforms how businesses, communities, and governments think and work together. Today, market systems approaches are being used in sectors such as agriculture, financial services, energy, health, and sanitation, so that markets work better for poor people. You can find out more at the Beam Exchange.
Okay, that was the introduction to market systems development. Now, I have had people say, well, we do that. So here is a video that tries to point out some of the differences between market development or market systems development. So
you've seen how the market systems approach helps people living in poverty, raising incomes, creating jobs, and improving access to services. This video explains the principles and methods that make the market systems approach so different. As practitioners, our watchwords are scale and sustainability. We want large numbers of people to benefit, far beyond initial locations and individuals. And we want them to continue to benefit long after our interventions end. Working in the markets that matter most to poor people, our programs share a few well-defined principles. We recognize that markets are complex systems, having many actors and functions. They can be dynamic and unpredictable. Instead of quick fixes, we seek to address the root causes of exclusion and dysfunction. This requires a realistic vision of how markets will carry on working better after our interventions end. So we act as facilitators, finding opportunities to align market actors' interests and capabilities with poverty reduction goals. All this means there are no blueprints for success, no simple recipes to bring about inclusive, sustainable development. This fact alone can be hard to reconcile with the pressures on aid agencies to spend quickly and deliver predictable results in short time frames. Fortunately, we have plenty of practical experience about what does and doesn't work in different contexts. We know that success builds upon the genuine incentives and capabilities of local actors, the people who will uphold system changes in the long term. So, we take time to understand business and government capabilities, individuals' attitudes, economic and social relationships. We take note of power relations and institutions, the rules and social norms that influence behavior, and we build local ownership of change, amplifying the energy and ideas coming from people within each market system. In practice, we often start with a few business partners, kickstarting pro-poor innovations that leave them better motivated and capable in the future. But we avoid getting over-invested in one business's success at the expense of system resilience. Instead, we stimulate replication and crowding in, using risk-sharing, advocacy, demonstration effects, and other interventions. This spreads innovations to wider circles of businesses and much larger numbers of beneficiaries. Our programs tend to employ distinctive tactics. We keep a low profile, encouraging leadership from organizations and businesses that are long-term actors. We create spaces for dialogue, since solutions often emerge from people within, not outside a system. We are cautious with subsidies and support, so as not to undermine incentives for innovation and investment. And, in the face of uncertainty, we deliberately experiment, taking risks, learning rapidly from failure and amplifying successes. In the end, these tactics mean our programs are geared to uphold long-term changes that benefit people living in poverty and avoid activities that create unsustainable results. In comparison to much conventional aid, the market systems approach can be demanding to manage. It requires vision, some adaptive management, a commitment to learning, and a capacity to refine or abandon intervention activities midstream if necessary. The rewards for this investment and flexibility lie in the scale of impact and the sustainability of results that the approach can achieve. You can find out more at the Beam Exchange.
Okay, and the last one is going to be more general. This is systems thinking, and I hope this might be easier for non-livelihoods or non-market types to apply to their area. So this is essentially systems thinking is keeping in mind that, at least as we say in the US, that nothing operates in a vacuum. If something happens somewhere, it's probably going to affect things in other places. So I will let the video go and explain it, which will almost certainly do a better job than I just did. So this is the last video.
This animation is about systems thinking and what it means for our work. We hope it encourages you to look deeper into the accompanying guide. Traditionally, we have been encouraged to solve problems by focusing on and developing solutions to individual parts of a problem. A log frame or a theory of change, for instance, encourages us to map out a tidy sequence of change that will solve developmental problems.
But reality is rarely as simple as that. To illustrate this, consider the old saying, "If you teach a man to fish, you can feed him forever." First of all, it's just as likely that that man is a woman, of course.
Many factors may mean that the simple activity of training someone to fish will not be enough to give them a livelihood. Climate change could be affecting the availability of fish. Pollution from urban areas could be killing the fish. Rich elites could be using illegal nets, leading to overfishing. A lack of control over household income could limit the benefit obtained by women fishers. Irrigation for agricultural development could threaten water resources.
On the other hand, many factors could open up new opportunities. A company may open up a new fish processing plant. Demand for fish may grow from expanding urban areas. The reality for the fisherman or fisherwoman is that their livelihood is determined by how well they can manage these challenges and opportunities, which may change every year. When you examine any of these issues separately, you will see that they themselves are made up of an interaction of many different factors. Consider pollution. There are obvious causes, but underneath these, there could be another set of causative factors. And there could be conditions that help this to happen. Now consider how uneven power develops. Pollution may perpetuate poverty in a number of ways, and in doing so, it may contribute to diminishing the influence and power that people have, going full circle and further reinforcing the problem of pollution. You can unpack any of the problems facing the fishermen in the same way, and you will find a similar complex web of stakeholders and issues that interact with each other.
These factors and the way they relate to each other is a system. As you can see, systems can get quite complicated. In the case of the fisherwomen, for instance, what issue would make the biggest difference? Is it improving household decision-making? Is it curbing pollution? Is it improving the capacity of women? Or should the target be reducing women's time poverty? Or improving government policy? Or addressing climate change?
Things definitely seemed simpler and more certain when we just trained fishermen. But without an understanding of the bigger picture, it is easier for us to make mistakes. It's easier for us to develop interventions that have no impact, and it's easier for us to set off a chain of events that actually has a negative impact. But there are strategies we can adopt that enable us to design effective programs even in the face of such complex systems. First of all, we should make an effort to understand the systems we are dealing with. This will not give total certainty, but it will give us ideas about how to start, and it will reduce the chances of unintended consequences.
Starting small scale is important. Developing a range of interventions that allows us to test theories about what will happen when we intervene helps us deal with uncertainty. Many of our interventions will fail, but that helps us understand how the system works and increases our ability, long-term, to have greater impact. Working with other stakeholders allows different skill sets and ideas to be brought to bear on a problem. It allows you to operate at different levels of the system.
Working with others also enables you to challenge your own preconceived ideas. So bring in people who challenge your perception on what is happening. Don't just pick the people you usually work with. Working in this way takes time and good facilitation, but it can lead to changes in power dynamics and structural change.
To make this succeed, we have to work differently. This requires us to learn how to fail quickly, safely and purposefully, and let go of preconceived ideas. This means loosening our control over things, to be prepared to adapt as things go along. Our role then is to create space and opportunities for local stakeholders to design solutions. To find out more, take a look at the Systems Thinking Guide that accompanies this animation. It'll give you more ideas, examples, and links to other resources.
This animation is
Okay, hopefully those videos were useful for everybody. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the origin of the Impact Investment Fund. That is what led us to include it. The project needed to have an answer for what's next, the exit strategy. That is, quite often we talk about we'll hand it over to somebody, or people will be able to do for themselves, and so on. But if you remember in the systems thinking about the if you teach a person to fish, and I'll get into it a little bit later, but just being able to do yourself is not always a complete answer. So we wanted to try and do a little more in that area. The other part was bridging the gap between capacities of the capacity of project beneficiaries and ensuring that the market actors, those private businesses that are further up the respective value chains, are better positioned to provide pro-poor goods and services to said beneficiaries. Now, that is just a fancy way of saying, oops, French translation, I think you, or maybe I hear the French translation, it seems, and I'm in English. Sorry, I wish I spoke French. But the bridging the gap capacity part is just when making sure that businesses provide goods and services, that is, products or services that our target group can use. So if a business is selling tractors, that's not really pertinent to our target group. If they're selling maybe small hand tractors that you guide by hand, or even just shovels and things like that, that's more relevant. So that is that's what's meant there. The last part is utilization of existing businesses instead of trying to create new ones as a means to sustaining impact. Quite often in the nonprofit sector, we try to create new businesses, but we do that when there's already businesses in the area. We just assume that either we don't know about them, or we say, no, they'll only try to help themselves, which is true. And we try to create new ones. But these pre-existing businesses didn't have our help so we're creating artificial competition, so to speak. It's not to say that we're not anyway, but these are usually small businesses that themselves are not particularly rich and such. And they were operating before we came, and they'll probably continue operating after we left. So if we can work with those small businesses to provide maybe more goods or services, or adjust the way that they operate, or if we can incentivize them to do that, then they'll probably continue doing that after we've left, because they were there before, they'll be there after. The only question is, will they continue to do what we worked with them on after? And quite often, NGOs are not always, we are nonprofit. So we don't always necessarily think in terms of businesses, for profit, market and such. So if you build it, they will come. That's kind of a mentality that we start businesses with, and it doesn't always work. So this is something, a supplemental idea, so to speak. Okay, this is a lot of text. It's a bit from the proposal, I believe, but the parts I wanted to focus on was the stimulating market systems and strengthening linkages and transactions between MSMEs and small farmers in the program area. MSMEs are micro and small medium enterprises and the small farmers, and strengthen linkages and stimulate market systems. Stimulating market systems is trying to incentivize these small businesses to provide goods and services, or inputs and services, that are not currently provided, that small farmers, that would be useful for small farmers. And strengthening linkages is making sure that these farmers are aware of these goods and services, that they're able to access them physically, and hopefully be able to afford them and have the capacity to actually use them. So we do a lot of work with building up beneficiary capacity, but then after that, say, you knowing how to use fertilizer or improve seeds and such, but then where do they get them? One possibility is from the private sector. So if they have the capacity to buy them and to know what they need to buy, the private sector is there and able to answer that. The other part is to promote market activities that are mutually beneficial to producers and buyers. This is important. We quite often think about what is beneficial to the buyers. And in this case, the buyers are the small farmers. They're buying maybe services, maybe they're buying seeds and inputs or things like that. Well, it can be that. In this case, the buyers are, the producers are the small farmers, and the buyers are, say, intermediaries and such. Quite often we think that the buyers should make some sort of compromise, and producers should maybe improve their work. But if anything is viewed as a compromise, it's less likely to work. So are there approaches that can be equally beneficial to the producers and to the buyers? A quick example may be A buyer has problems with collecting from a village because it's far away, or they come at different times, or things like this. If the buyer is able to set up a small storage center where people can bring their produce to the storage center, sell it there, and then when it's full, then the buyer can come and pick up the entire thing and sell it instead of making multiple trips. That's beneficial to both sides. So that's what's meant by promote market activities that are mutually beneficial. We really need to think about this. The idea of the private sector and even our beneficiaries operating purely on altruism will work sometimes, but we need to consider those times where maybe it won't work so well. So some of the objectives of the investment fund were making it easier, behavior. That is, if goods or services are far away, or if they're expensive, just not available in some way, people are less likely to try and use them. If I have to travel 20 kilometers to go and buy a shovel, maybe I'm not going to go and buy that shovel. Maybe I'll just use a stick to try and cultivate the ground. If goods and services are made more accessible and potential customers have the capacity to use them, then they are more likely to use those goods. So we build the capacity. We teach about crop schedules. We show them the benefits of improved seeds, maybe fertilizers, and they're able to buy them better. Maybe it's because we've worked with some businesses to do mobile sales, and the businesses come out, take orders, and then once they've reached a amount of orders that is worthwhile for the business to transport it, the business can then transport it. And you don't have to worry about 30 or 50 farmers organizing themselves. You have one point who has an incentive to do so, the private sector, the business, to take orders, and then they will organize the delivery. Doesn't always work, but again, that's just an example. Another objective was pro-poor development of the MSME private sector. Pro-poor development is just development that benefits the poor. Development can, to use the tractor sales analogy again, we could promote tractor sales, but that's not really pro-poor. That's not something that would help our target group. That would help agriculture in the area, maybe the economy, but not the poor. So focusing on those kinds of things that would impact the poor more than other areas. So larger producers are usually the minority, and two enterprises are usually easier to work with. It's easier for a business to come and work with, say, 5 large farmers and negotiate with them and be able to do 5 trips to pick up the products rather than 50 small farmers. So, are there ways that we can incentivize businesses or make it easier for businesses to interface with lots of smaller farmers? So encouraging these enterprises through financial nudges to increase their small farmer clientele volumes through various means. I mean, improving efficiency. Maybe they use an old, very inefficient truck to go and pick things up. And if we helped them with, say, a lighter, more fuel efficient truck, maybe a 4-wheel drive truck, the businesses could do collections easier, maybe establishing private collecting centers, maybe reducing the operating costs. There's different ways. And I've heard before people ask about a manual for doing market systems development. And the thing is, there's not a copy and paste way to do it. It requires a lot of thinking, analysis, and per scenario planning. Ultimately, the objective of the investment fund was sustainability and resilience. As I mentioned before, the enterprises were there when we came, and they'll be there when we left or when we leave. we don't have to worry about standing something up, helping them to stay up, and hoping that they continue after we leave. Most enterprises are not going to fail as a result of us working with them. They may not continue the work that we've done with them, and I would say that would likely be a fault of us, but they're probably not going to fail. If we focus on pre-existing enterprises and help reduce their risk in trying new types of revenue streams or new types of activities. So, for example, again, tractors. If a large tractor dealer wants to sell more things and they're not going to be able to sell large tractors to beneficiaries, maybe they can sell these small two-cycle hand-powered tractors, or even rent them. That could be an additional money for the business to an area where they're never going to be able to sell large tractors to these small farmers. So if they want to make money, they need to expand their offerings. So that's an example of, and that's something the investment fund could potentially have worked with to help a business try that out. So the investment fund could have paid part of that. The business could pay the other part, and if it fails, the business had not lost as much. Okay. So we come to the give a man a fish or help a man to fish phrase. So if you give a man to fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But personally, I've always wondered, like, what if the man's fishing pole breaks? Or what if he wants to use a net? Or if he wants to upgrade to a boat? The goal of the investment fund was to help make local market systems stronger and more resilient, and influencing local economies to offer more pro-poor goods like fishing poles or nets or small boats. So when our beneficiaries have improved capacity, maybe to fish, they now also have more access to, say, inputs like fishing poles or boats, or maybe even services like buying fish or refrigeration, or there's all kinds of things. If the farmers or if the fishermen are able to catch a lot more fish, but then the market can't absorb that amount of additional fish, say there's no refrigeration, then there's no point. So we need to make sure that both sides are balanced when doing market systems development, or even development in general. So how the investment fund works and how it was originally, how it works. How it was originally envisioned to work, we were supposed to target small enterprises as they have less money and are arguably more easy to influence. We were supposed to offer just enough co-investment that the small enterprise would co-invest the majority. So like the investment fund would invest 30% and the business 70%. And if the business thought that it would work, then they might be more willing to do it, because this is essentially a 30% discount that they would never get otherwise. If they didn't think it would work, they probably wouldn't agree, even if it was 30%, because they would lose 70%. And the project would partner with these institutions and help provide some ongoing oversight of the investments. The project would partner with an institution that would provide additional co-investment and would provide ongoing oversight of the investments, whose efforts would be sustained via the returns from the investment. That completely didn't work. We were hoping to find, there is actually an investment fund in Madagascar, but the scale and the distance of the FIOVANA project and the businesses FIOVANA project was working with proved not to be viable. How the investment fund is actually working. We've discovered we have to go beyond small enterprises, and we started targeting large enterprises to try and affect more scale in less time. The fund actually provides grants to the enterprises, and the majority of the financing to the enterprises, and the enterprises provide a minority amount. So instead of us paying 30% and them paying 70, it's more like the other way around. We're paying 70 and they're paying 30. So it's certainly more likely to get them to agree because they have a lot less risk. But and lastly, the grants are being managed, distributed by the project as opposed to a external organization. And it just turned out that the small businesses, there just was not enough profit for an external organization to manage so many small micro businesses. What works as originally envisioned? The distribution of capital to assist and incentivize these small enterprises. So regardless of how we're doing it and the volumes we're doing it, we are getting businesses to change or to come up with new ideas of how to operate. And we're doing that through providing some capital to essentially make it less risky for these businesses to try out new things. And we are continuing to focus on pre-existing enterprises rather than making new businesses or cooperatives or things like that. The new businesses, in effect, maybe micro, is being done by the IGAs, the income generation activities, and we're supposed to be doing cooperative work as well as another part of the FIOVANA project. So, all right, the difficulties we've run into, the challenges of targeting micro, small, medium enterprises for market strengthening. Knowing what the weaknesses are in the market on a commune level has been difficult. We did do a market assessment, but that tends to be for the whole region, and it doesn't necessarily mean that in this particular commune that same weakness applies. Identifying enterprises in those areas where appropriate to address that market weakness. So maybe in a particular commune, there's just not, people want to produce chickens, but nobody buys chickens, or nobody sells chicks, or nobody provides poultry inputs in that particular area. And there's no businesses that even deal with agricultural inputs. So we could create a new business, or we could work with a business, I don't know, a pharmacy. But pharmacies don't know anything about poultry, so they're not really appropriate to work with them. So there was that. And then, of course, even when we do find a business that is in the area that addresses a market that could work in an area that, or work in a sector that addresses market weakness, would they be willing or even have the capacity to work with us? Those were all issues. Providing credible business plans and remote support from headquarters. SME, the business plans that were provided were quite often ones that the businesses thought would be good for themselves, but not necessarily good for beneficiaries. And it was hard to convey to the businesses that it was hard for headquarters, me, I guess, to support the team initially in trying to influence the businesses as they created business applications and business plans. Number 3, the balance between ensuring oversight and slowing the whole process down. The investment fund, I think, had 3 different levels of oversight, maybe 4. The team themselves, they would evaluate and try to find businesses they thought were appropriate. Then we had the selection committee, and then we had AdCom. This slowed things down a lot. And yeah, for something that's supposed to be fairly dynamic and acting quickly, this really slowed the investment fund down a lot. The targeting many small businesses instead of a few large ones makes impact and scale more difficult. Ideally, we would target many small businesses because they just do not have the means to change as easily as large enterprises. Unfortunately, you have to target a lot more small businesses to achieve the same impact that maybe one or two large businesses would achieve. So that was, yeah, lesson learned. Another issue, explaining the investment fund to other team members. Issues came up where it was, people said, well, let's use the investment fund. It's not meant to be a pot of money. It wasn't meant to fund IGAs. It wasn't meant to provide, or it was meant, sorry, to provide just enough incentive for pre-existing businesses to expand. But we ended up giving a lot more money than just enough incentive. And the idea was to strengthen local market systems. So when our target groups, the beneficiaries, needed services and goods, they would have a place to go to. These were concepts that proved daunting to go and convey. Ensuring companies' ability to repay the investment fund within the business cycle. This was something that was not originally planned. There was, as a means to accountability, at some point it was added to the investment fund that the businesses would have to pay the money back until they finished their intervention, and then we would give them all their money back. But this, especially for small businesses, this is really hard to do, and it proved up to be a massive disincentive. So definitely would recommend not doing that next time. And last, encouraging large national companies to expand their customer base into the FIOVANA zones. Getting large businesses to deal with a lot of small farmers is just very hard. These large businesses prefer to deal with large farms. And they have money. They're not necessarily as tempted by, a few $1,000s or even maybe $100,000 to go and change how they do things. So it's harder to influence these larger enterprises. We have had successes. For starters, of course, we've learned so much, a lot. ADRA is much more aware of market systems development than it was before. The market system development was a much larger part of our recent successful bid in DRC. That bid was around $100 million. And I would argue that part of that was because of our robust market systems component. The donor specifically asked for market systems development. That was not a fluke. So I would ask those, for people, at least for those working with USA, to consider this is something that the donor is looking and now specifically asking for. The investment fund has improved our credibility in the donor's eyes. It helps us show that we have we've incorporated it as realistic, as part of our realistic exit strategies. Despite the investment fund's failures, we've actually had more compliments from the donor than we have criticisms. So there's that. Targeting, we've learned about targeting. We've not identified as many enterprises as we would like to have worked with, but the number of irrelevant and unrealistic business plans have decreased quite a bit. The team has a much better understanding of successful targeting. So that is understanding what kind of businesses we need to look for. What are the signs that a business might be good to work with? How to speak with the businesses? All of these things are things that I think is kind of new for ADRA. So another thing is a new level of due diligence. Businesses were selected not just on their financials, on what the businesses said. The businesses are always going to present themselves as being good. But we also systematized the evaluation of what the community thought of the businesses. So we went out into the communities. Before we had funded a business, we would ask the communities, do you know of this business? If yes, do they provide these goods and services that the business said that they provide? Do you think they operate relatively fairly? These kinds of things. If businesses rated poorly in that, we didn't work with them. We wanted to be sure that these were businesses that already had established trust in the areas. Again, that's the point of working with somebody that's pre-established. They know the market, they know their clientele, they know, and their clientele knows them. The selected businesses were given access to finance they didn't have previously. The finance market in the region is pretty inaccessible for micro and small enterprises. So this was an opportunity for them. The project learned about interventions that could possibly be done by the private sector that have traditionally been done by NGOs. The storage being an example. We had a fair number of applications where the businesses suggested to us that they could use storage in the communities themselves. So this actually increases efficiency, and it's centrally managed, so you don't have to worry about one person has something to lose. You don't have to worry about a group or the tragedy of the commons issue. And when the storage was built, these businesses could buy on site the products and store it there using usually a representative. And then once they've got a large enough volume, they can then come out without having to spend time going to each farm or each farm gate. And they can be sure that they have enough to go out there, spend the money on gasoline and these kinds of things, to go out there, pick up the products, and then bring them back. So that that increases efficiency, makes sure that people that may have been missed when the buyer was there are able to go and sell, and so on. And lastly, more access and opportunities for beneficiaries. While, again, not as many businesses were worked with as we had hoped, there are buyers who are able to buy more. There were buyers and sellers that were able to expand their area and operating area, so they could sell to more people, which were usually our target groups. You could do things such as buying more from beneficiaries, selling more to beneficiaries, all kinds of things. So what would we change for next time? The repayment scheme that we mentioned, that was untenable. That needs to not be repeated next time. Possibly recruiting from the private sector. I think the investment fund team has done admirably, but and this is just my opinion, but it's quite hard to go from to think in private sector terms when your entire professional life you've been working in the nonprofit area. Also, improve trainings and mentoring. I've tried to do mentoring remotely. It has been a challenge for me. And trainings, the trainings were thought about. There are some excellent trainings by the Springfield Center, but that when the project started was right when COVID started and when all of the in-person training stopped. So unfortunately, that was less of an option. Reduce the number of layers of oversight. Oversight is needed. When you're handing out just money, you need some oversight, but the levels of oversight, the number of levels of oversight we had and the way they operated literally backed up applications by months and months. That's just not acceptable. And probably a lot of other little things, but we won't get into those. So yeah, thank you all very much. I'm gonna have to switch over to mobile. So I'm going to log off for just a moment, but if you have questions, please start answering or asking them. You can put them in the question and answer if you like. We have the investment team on, so they can also answer some questions. And yeah, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Perfect. Is there anyone with questions? You can unmute your mic or you can type them in the chat box.
Okay, just to be sure, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And so far, no questions and nothing. Oh, there's one question in the chat box. David, someone asked, yes, I don't know if you can see it on your phone, but someone said that they didn't fully understand what happened with the repayment schemes.
Good question. We didn't either. The the repayment schemes, as I understand it, was originally for the purpose of ensuring accountability. And that is, the businesses were, for example, accepted, their applications were accepted, and they were, I believe, either given some money or told they would be given money once the intervention was finished. But the problem is, a lot of these small enterprises didn't have money to do repayment with, or have money to use on, say, the intervention. Even though we said we'd reimburse them at the end, they just didn't have that. So it made it it really reduced the attractiveness of it to a lot of potential businesses. And maybe Eric's team can speak some more to that.
Oui, merci pour tous. Donc, l'idée initiale du système de remboursement était d'avoir beaucoup plus l'engagement des entreprises et de filtrer un peu les entreprises plus sérieuses, en ce sens que lorsqu'il s'agit d'une donation pure et simple, les entreprises ont eu une tentative d'utiliser le fonds à d'autres fins et n'arrivent pas à honorer leurs obligations en matière contractuelle. Donc, nous avons pratiqué ce système de remboursement pour l'entreprise. On donne l'argent et l'entreprise, dans un premier temps, retourne le fonds à ADRA, et après une certaine évaluation de la performance et de l'atteinte des objectifs fixés, de nos attentes, c'est-à-dire des impacts au niveau des bénéficiaires, de l'extension de leurs services au niveau des bénéficiaires, soit vraiment visible et ayant un impact. Nous faisons une évaluation en fin de cycle et nous allons retourner le fonds aux entreprises. Parmi les entreprises financières actuellement, il y en a déjà quelques d'entre elles qui ont réussi à avoir de bonnes images, bonnes réalisations comme ça, et elles ont déjà reçu leur fonds. Donc,
Thank you so much, Davidson. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat box.
All right. Well, I would invite anybody that does have questions in the future to reach out to Eric and myself. And I want to give one final thank you to Eric and his team, especially to Eric. I don't think people appreciate that he was hired to manage the investment fund, and he is, without having done it earlier, and he's demonstrated repeatedly that a very sound understanding of it, which is not an easy concept. But moreover, we've unfortunately had a high turnover for different reasons of the P2 lead position. And Eric has been somehow superhumanly balancing doing that while managing the investment fund. So I don't think people appreciate how doing two large roles, how difficult that is. So thank you, Eric and team, and to the audience. Please do reach out to us if you have any questions. Think of any questions later.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was recorded and will be posted on Hub or YouTube. Have a great day.
Thank you.